The envelope was still in my hands when Mom's voice cracked through the phone line, thin, trembling, almost strangled. "Pippa, what have you done?" It was December 26th, the morning after Christmas dinner, and my mother was calling me from Aunt Linda's kitchen in Newark, where the coffee was probably still hot and the shame, I imagined, was scalding everything. But let me take you back to where this really began. Not at that dinner table. Much further back. I'm sitting in my apartment in Jersey City right now, the radiator hissing against the December cold, my breath fogging the window as I watch the street below. The radiator sounds like my childhood, that constant, anxious whisper of heat struggling to reach every corner. There's a specific smell in this room: old wood, my lavender diffuser, and something metallic from the pipes. It's a smell that reminds me I'm far enough away from my family's house in Newark, but not far enough that I can't still hear them. Let me explain what happened at that table. More importantly, let me tell you who I am first, because you need to understand that I wasn't some passive, broken thing waiting to be saved. I'm Pippa, 29 years old, a high school English teacher with a master's degree I paid for myself, living independently in an apartment I rent on my own salary, driving a car that's finally paid off. I teach 150 students every year, mark papers until 11 p.m., write college recommendation letters that get kids into Yale and Princeton. I'm the kind of person people trust with their futures. But at my family's table? I was treated like a beggar. The Christmas dinner was at Aunt Linda's house, the big colonial on the corner of Bloomfield Avenue, the one with the circular driveway and the professionally decorated wreaths. Linda is my mother's younger sister, and she's always been the golden one. Successful in real estate, married to an engineer, 2 kids in private school, a wine fridge in the kitchen. My mother, by contrast, had me at 24, raised me alone on a nurse's salary, and has spent 29 years oscillating between pride in what I've accomplished and resentment that I got away. That's the real conflict, you see. Not just one explosive moment. It's the slow accumulation of being made to feel like your achievements are somehow a betrayal of the family you came from. I arrived at Aunt Linda's at 5 p.m. sharp. The driveway was already crowded with cars. My cousin's Range Rover, Uncle Michael's truck, their friends' vehicles. The house smelled like standing rib roast and cinnamon, the kind of smell that fills a room so completely it becomes almost aggressive. The foyer was cold, that particular Jersey winter cold that seeps in through the heavy front door and refuses to leave, even with the heat on full blast. My fingers were numb as I took off my coat. My younger cousin Melissa was in the living room, already 3 glasses of wine deep, laughing about a vacation to Turks and Caicos. She teaches part-time at a yoga studio when she feels like it. No one's ever questioned her career choices. Here's what you need to know about my family. There's a specific texture to how they treat success that comes from outside the family. It's not celebrated, it's surveilled. It's watched like a fox watches a henhouse. And when you do something that might draw attention away from them, away from their narrative, that's when things get dangerous. Dinner was at 7 p.m. We sat around Linda's mahogany table, the one that seats 14 and always feels like it's judging you. I was placed between my Uncle Michael and my mother. That was strategic. I understand that now. The conversation moved predictably through the usual channels. How's work? Fine. Are you seeing anyone? No. When are you getting married? Unknown. The questions had teeth. I could feel them. Each one was designed to find the tender spots, the places where I might be failing to meet expectations. But nothing prepared me for what happened when dessert came out. Aunt Linda had made her famous tiramisu, the one she's made every Christmas since I was a child. She served herself first, then Uncle Michael, then Melissa and her husband. My mother reached for a plate. And then Linda looked directly at me, her eyes small and hard as marbles, and said, with the kind of careful enunciation people use when they want to make sure you hear every syllable, "Be grateful we let you sit at the table at all, Pippa." The table went silent. Not an uncomfortable silence, the kind where someone said something mildly inappropriate. This was the silence of a room recognizing that something had broken. Even Melissa, 3 glasses deep, stopped laughing. I felt it first in my chest, that sensation of your ribs suddenly understanding their cages. Then in my hands, which went cold. The smell of the tiramisu, suddenly cloying and thick, made me want to leave my body entirely. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to say something. To defend me. To say anything. She cut a piece of tiramisu with her fork. What did you mean by that? I asked Linda, my voice steadier than I felt. And here's the thing, I already knew what she meant. I'd always known. But I wanted to hear it said aloud in front of witnesses, so that no one could pretend later that it was my imagination, my sensitivity, my misinterpretation. You know exactly what I mean, Linda said. She set down her dessert fork. You come here, you're always complaining about your job, your apartment, your life. You act like you're better than this family. Like teaching in public school is some kind of noble sacrifice. Meanwhile, you're ungrateful. You've never once thanked me for including you, for making room for you at this table. My hand went to my purse. I don't remember deciding to do it. The envelope was in there, has been in there for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. The moment when I'd be so angry, so hurt, so completely done with the performance of gratitude, that I wouldn't hesitate. Here's where I ask you, have you ever had someone make you feel like your presence was a burden? Like your success was an insult to them? Tell me in the comments. Where are you watching this from right now? I pulled out the envelope. I could feel my mother's eyes on me, confused and afraid. Linda's expression shifted. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe. Terror. Thank you, I said quietly, for letting me sit at this table. And then I opened it. The envelope had been sitting in my apartment for 3 weeks. 21 days of me holding it, feeling its weight, understanding exactly what would happen the moment I opened it at that table. But I need to tell you how I got here first. I need you to understand that this wasn't rage, it was evidence. It was the culmination of something I'd been carefully documenting, like a teacher grading a semester's worth of work and finally seeing the pattern. Let me take you back 6 months. It was June, and my father had just died. I'm saying that simply because it deserves to be said simply. My father, James, Jimmy to his friends, passed away on a Tuesday morning from a stroke. He was 67. I was at school when my mother called. I remember standing in the hallway outside my classroom, the fluorescent lights humming their familiar drone, the sound of teenagers laughing behind the closed door, and my mother's voice saying, "He's gone, Pippa. He's just gone." My father and I had been close. Not in an easy way. He was a difficult man, proud and stubborn, a construction worker who'd never quite forgiven himself for not making it big like his brother-in-law. But he believed in me. He came to my college graduation. He asked me about my lesson plans. He'd call me sometimes just to tell me a joke he'd heard, or to ask my opinion on something he was reading. When he died, I thought my mother and I would grieve together. I thought Aunt Linda would step back and let us have that. Instead, something shifted. Something broke. 3 days after the funeral, my mother called me. Her voice was different. Softer, but also harder underneath. Like she was making a difficult decision. "Pippa, your father left some things to manage. The house needs work. The taxes are higher than we thought. I need your help." I didn't hesitate. I took 2 weeks off school, unpaid, and went to help her sort through Dad's things. The house smelled like him, Old Spice, coffee, the particular scent of a man who worked with his hands. Sawdust and engine oil. It was the smell of safety, and it was gone. While we were sorting through papers in his study, I found something. An old ledger. My father's handwriting, careful and precise, documenting something I didn't understand at first. Dates. Amounts. My mother's name beside dollar figures. I asked my mother about it. She went white. Literally white. The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. She took the ledger from my hands without answering and locked it in her bedroom drawer. But not before I'd seen enough to understand. My father had been lending money to Aunt Linda. Large amounts. And there was no record of it ever being repaid. That's when I started paying attention. I went back to my apartment and started making phone calls. I contacted my father's accountant, a woman named Mrs. Chan who'd worked with Dad for 15 years. I asked her, carefully, about his financial records. His loans. His assets. She was hesitant at first, but when I explained the situation, she agreed to send me copies of everything. What I found made my stomach turn. My father had loaned Aunt Linda and Uncle Michael over $47,000 between 2015 and 2024. Not gifts, loans. Documented, dated, detailed. My father had kept meticulous records. A real estate venture that went sideways. A kitchen renovation. Melissa's private school tuition. A trip to Europe. $47,000. The smell of my apartment changed when I understood this. It started to smell like betrayal, that metallic, almost ashy scent of something burning. I sat at my kitchen table for hours, spreading out the papers, photographing them with my phone, documenting everything. But it got worse. Much worse. I called Mrs. Chen back and asked her about my father's will. There was a pause. A long one. Then she said something that made the radiator behind me seem to scream. Pippa, your father changed his will 14 months ago. Has your mother not told you? My heart stopped. Actually stopped, like a bird hitting glass. Changed it how? He left the house to your mother, as expected. But his savings, $185,000, he left to be divided between your mother and your Aunt Linda. Equally. 50-50. He added a codicil 6 weeks before he died. Your mother. She has power of attorney. She was supposed to execute the will according to his wishes. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't. The room was spinning. My father had left half of his savings to Aunt Linda, the woman he'd already loaned nearly $50,000 to, the woman who barely called him, who made jokes about his job, who'd. Then Mrs. Chen said something else. Pippa, I need to tell you something else. I wasn't supposed to call you, but I think you should know. Your mother came to see me in August. She told me she wanted to contest the will. She said your father wasn't in his right mind when he changed it. She wanted to know if I could testify to that. The cold. That Jersey winter cold that never really leaves, it was in my bones now. It was in my blood. I understood, in that moment, what was happening. My mother was planning to contest my father's will. To keep his entire $185,000. To cheat my Aunt Linda out of her inheritance. And I understood something else, something that made my skin feel like it was trying to separate from my body. My mother was using me. She'd called me to help sort through my father's things. She'd been searching. Looking for evidence that could help her case. Trying to find reasons to claim he was mentally unstable. The anger I felt wasn't hot. It was cold. It was the cold of Jersey winter seeping through every crack you didn't know existed. I photographed everything. Every bank statement, every loan document, every photograph of the will. Every email from Mrs. Chen. I organized it all chronologically. I cross-referenced dates with my mother's phone calls. I created a timeline. But here's what I want you to understand. I wasn't angry at my Aunt Linda at this point. I was angry at my mother. I was angry at the betrayal of my father's memory, at the stealing from his estate, at the manipulation of me. And then, in October, everything shifted again. I was at the grocery store, Stop and Shop on Tunnelly Avenue, when I ran into Linda in the produce section. She was reaching for apples, and I was standing there with a basket of vegetables, and she just ignored me. Completely. She saw me. Our eyes met. And she turned away like I was invisible. I followed her through the store. I wasn't planning to, my feet just moved. And I watched as she texted someone. I couldn't see the phone, but I saw her face. The expression changed. It became satisfied. Pleased. Later that week, my mother called me. Her voice was different again. Harder. Pippa, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. Your Aunt Linda has lawyered up. She's contesting your father's will too. She's claiming that I manipulated him, that I convinced him to change his will in the first place. She's saying I'm the one who wasn't in his right mind. It clicked then. All of it. Aunt Linda knew my mother was planning to contest the will. And she'd gotten ahead of it. She'd hired a lawyer first. She'd weaponized the situation before my mother could. They were both circling the body of my dead father, fighting over his money like vultures. And I was supposed to just sit at their table and be grateful for the seat. Here's what I need to ask you. Have you ever discovered that the people who raised you aren't who you thought they were? Have you ever felt that moment when the ground shifts? Tell me your story in the comments. I'm reading every single one. So I gathered everything. Every document. Every photograph. Every email. I made copies. I put them all in an envelope. And I waited for Christmas dinner. I waited for the moment when someone would make me feel small enough, ungrateful enough, insignificant enough that I wouldn't hesitate to show them exactly what I'd found. Aunt Linda gave me that moment when she said, "Be grateful we let you sit at the table at all." The moment my fingers touched the envelope, I felt the temperature in the room drop. It wasn't metaphorical, it was actual, physical cold, the kind that happens when everyone stops breathing at the same time and the oxygen leaves the space. The mahogany table, which had felt warm and welcoming just minutes before, suddenly felt like a slab. My mother's hand reached toward me. "Pippa, don't." But I'd already opened it. The first document was the ledger. My father's handwriting. The dates. The amounts. $47,000 in loans to Aunt Linda, meticulously recorded, never repaid. I slid it across the table toward her, and I watched her face. I watched the exact moment comprehension hit her, the way her jaw tightened, the way her eyes went small and bright with panic. "What is this?" Uncle Michael asked, but his voice was uncertain. He already knew. "This," I said, and my voice was steady. I was shocked by how steady. "Is a record of the money Dad loaned you. Over 9 years. For your real estate ventures, your renovations, your vacations, your daughter's tuition." The silence was complete now. Even Melissa had put down her wine glass. I pulled out the second document. The bank statements. These show that Dad never asked for any of it back. He just kept lending. "Pippa." My mother's voice was thin. Desperate. "This isn't the time." "When is the time, Mom?" I looked at her directly, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before, fear. Real, animal fear. Because she understood now that I knew. That I had proof. "When is the time to talk about the fact that you're contesting Dad's will? When is the time to talk about the money?" The envelope wasn't empty. I pulled out the third document, a photocopy of my father's will, with the codicil highlighted in yellow. The one that left $185,000 to be divided equally between my mother and Aunt Linda. The one that my mother had been trying to conceal, trying to contest, trying to pretend never existed. "Your father was in perfect mental health," I said quietly, reading from a letter I'd brought. A letter from Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, the neurologist who'd seen my father 2 weeks before he changed his will. The letter stated, in clinical but unambiguous terms, that James Morrison showed no signs of cognitive decline, dementia, or mental incapacity. He was lucid. He was thoughtful. He knew exactly what he was doing. Aunt Linda stood up. Her chair scraped against the hardwood floor with a sound like an animal in pain. "You have no right." "I have every right." My voice didn't waver. "I'm Dad's daughter. These are his records. His wishes. His legacy." What happened next was what I'd been waiting for, but also what I'd been dreading. My mother started crying. Not gentle tears, actual, gasping sobs. The kind that come from a place of genuine desperation. She put her face in her hands, and her shoulders shook. For a moment, I felt it. The pull. The guilt. The voice that says, "You're being cruel. You're hurting her. She's your mother." But then I remembered something. I remembered being 7 years old, sitting in my mother's car outside the courthouse where they were finalizing her divorce from my father. I remembered her telling me, with her voice tight and angry, "Your father ruined our lives, Pippa. Remember that. Everything we don't have, it's because of him." I remembered being 12, watching her cry at the kitchen table because money was tight, because the house needed a new roof, because she was working double shifts. And I remembered, years later, finding out that my father had offered to help. Multiple times. He'd offered to pay for things. And my mother had refused, because accepting his help meant admitting she needed him. It meant admitting he was worth something. So she'd let us struggle. She'd let me see her suffer. And she'd let me believe it was his fault. Until now, when I understood, It wasn't that simple. It was never that simple. You lied to me, I said to my mother, and my voice was sad now, not angry. Sadness is worse than anger. Sadness means you've accepted that something you loved is fundamentally broken. You told me Dad didn't support us. You told me he didn't care. But he gave you everything. And then you tried to take the last thing he left you to give to someone else. My mother looked up at me, her face blotchy and wet. Pippa, the house is too expensive. The taxes. I don't know how to. You could have asked for help, I said. You could have told me the truth. Instead, you lied. You manipulated me into helping you search for ammunition against his will. You used his death as a way to get what you wanted. And here's what I need you to understand, because this is the part that matters. I wasn't entirely blameless either. I could have confronted this differently. I could have gone to my mother privately with what I'd found. I could have given her a chance to explain, to make it right before Christmas dinner, before an audience, before it became public and permanent. Instead, I chose the dramatic moment. I chose the hurt. I chose the revenge. Because I was angry. And because I wanted her to feel, for once, what it felt like to be seen. To be exposed. To have your failures documented and displayed in front of people who mattered. Aunt Linda sat back down slowly. Pippa, I didn't know your mother was planning to contest the will. I didn't know about any of this. I know, I said. And I meant it. Linda was culpable. She'd accepted loans she never planned to repay, she'd encouraged my father's financial dependence on her, but she wasn't the architect of the lie. She wasn't the one who'd weaponized grief. That was my mother. Uncle Michael was very quiet. He was looking at Aunt Linda with an expression I'd never seen before. Disappointment, maybe. Or the slow recognition that the woman he'd married had been using his marriage as collateral for financial gain. I pulled out one more document. This one was a letter from a lawyer. My lawyer, actually, someone I'd consulted in October. It outlined the steps my mother could take to make things right, acknowledge the will, honor my father's wishes, accept the division of the estate as he'd intended. This is what needs to happen, I said, placing it on the table. Mom, you get half of the $185,000. Aunt Linda gets half. The house is yours. But the rest, you need to follow Dad's instructions. He loved you. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of after he died. But he also wanted to make sure Linda was taken care of. He wanted both of you to have something. He was trying to heal something between you. My mother looked at the letter like it was written in a language she didn't understand. I'm going to the estate lawyer tomorrow, I continued, my voice very steady now. I'm going to present these documents. I'm going to make sure Dad's will is executed the way he wrote it. You can fight me if you want. But you'll lose. And you'll lose publicly. You'll lose in a courthouse with a record. You'll lose in a way that can't be taken back. It was a threat. A gentle one, but a threat nonetheless. My mother put her face back in her hands. This time, the sobs were quieter. Resigned. Melissa excused herself to the bathroom. Uncle Michael followed Aunt Linda into the kitchen. And my mother and I sat there, alone at that massive mahogany table, with all of my father's secrets finally exposed to the light. And now I'm asking you directly, where are you listening to this story from? Are you sitting in your own kitchen? Your car? Your bedroom? Are you alone, or are you listening with someone you trust? Tell me where you are, and tell me, have you ever had to choose between loyalty and truth? Have you ever had to decide whether family was worth protecting if it meant protecting a lie? I want to hear from you. Comment below. Tell me your story, because right now, you're not alone in this either. The tiramisu was still sitting on the table, untouched and congealing. The estate was settled by February. Not easily, not without lawyers and difficult conversations, but it was settled. My mother accepted the terms. She didn't fight me, not because she suddenly became noble or self-aware, but because she understood that fighting would cost her more than conceding. Pride is a luxury you can't always afford when you're guilty. The house was appraised at $340,000. The savings were divided as my father intended, $92,500 to my mother, $92,500 to Aunt Linda. My mother also kept the house. My father had wanted that. He'd written it in explicitly, "The home we built together belongs to the woman who built it with me." Aunt Linda and Uncle Michael used their portion to pay off their remaining debts. I learned this indirectly through my mother, who'd started having actual conversations with her sister again. Not easy ones, but real ones. Linda had apparently told her, quietly, that she'd spent 15 years thinking my father was helping them out of charity. She'd had no idea he was slowly drowning himself, that he'd cashed out parts of his retirement to cover her real estate ventures. "I feel sick," Linda had told my mother. "I feel like I stole from him." That's when I started to understand something. Complicity isn't always the same as malice. Linda had been greedy, yes. Irresponsible, absolutely. But she hadn't deliberately set out to destroy my father financially. She'd just taken what was offered, without really thinking about the cost to the person offering it. It's a very human failing. My mother was different. My mother had known. She'd watched my father give and give and give, and she'd resented him for it. Then, after he died, she decided that his love, manifested in that will, in that final act of generosity to both the women in his life, was something she could erase. Something she could take for herself. That's the distinction that matters. I didn't reconcile with my mother immediately. What happened at that Christmas table wasn't something that could be fixed with an apology and a hug. But I also didn't cut her off. I called her every Sunday. I had lunch with her once a month. I was present, but I was different. I was there as a daughter, but not as a daughter who'd been broken by her lies. There's a difference. What surprised me most was what happened after. The ripple effects, the way one moment of truth-telling fractured the entire family structure and forced everyone to reassess their positions. In March, Melissa called me. She was crying. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I just realized. I've been cruel to you. At every holiday, every gathering. I've been cruel because my mother was cruel to you, and I followed her lead. I didn't even notice I was doing it." I listened to her cry for a while before I responded. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because after Christmas, after what you did, I went home and I looked at my life. I looked at my marriage, my job, the fact that I've been coasting on my parents' money while I find myself for 7 years. And I realized, I've never built anything. You built everything. You're a teacher. You have your own apartment. You have students who love you. You have respect. And I've been looking down on you because I was jealous." The admission was honest, raw, and I believed her. We started having coffee together. Real coffee, real conversations. Not the performative family gatherings, but actual time. Melissa went back to school for occupational therapy. She's working now, not much money, but it's hers. She's building something. And our relationship, slowly, became something real. But the biggest shift happened in my relationship with myself. Do you understand what it means to finally stop apologizing for your own competence? For your own achievements? For the fact that you built something from nothing, that your apartment, your degree, your job, your independence, these are things you earned? I'd spent so much of my life feeling ashamed of being successful. Ashamed that I'd left my family behind. Ashamed that I was doing well when my mother was struggling. Ashamed that I'd made different choices. I'd internalized the message that my success was somehow a betrayal. After Christmas, something shifted in my chest. The weight that had been there since childhood, the weight of their expectations, their resentment, their need for me to apologize for existing, it started to lift. I was promoted at school in April. The principal called me into her office and offered me the position of English department chair. It came with a raise, more responsibility, and the opportunity to redesign the entire curriculum. My immediate instinct was to say, "But I'm only 29. Aren't there more experienced teachers who—" But I stopped myself mid-sentence. "I accept," I said instead. "Thank you." The principal smiled. "You deserve this, Pippa. You're an exceptional teacher. You make your students feel seen." Later, I realized that was exactly what I'd done at that Christmas table. I'd made everyone see, not in a cruel way, but in a necessary way. I'd made them see the truth. I'd made them see my father's love. I'd made them see their own complicity. I'd made them see me. That April, I bought a new car. Nothing fancy, a used Honda with low mileage, paid for in cash. I took a photograph of myself standing next to it, and I sent it to my mother with a caption, "Bought this myself. No loans. All saved. Thought you'd want to see." It wasn't cruel. But it was firm. It was a boundary. It was me saying, I am building something. I am doing well. And I don't need your permission to celebrate that. In May, on Father's Day, I did something I'd been planning since February. I planted a tree in my apartment complex's courtyard, with permission from the landlord. It was a cherry tree. My father had loved cherry blossoms. Every spring, he'd drag us to Van Cortlandt Park to see them. I put a small plaque at the base, James Morrison. He gave everything. He was seen. My mother came to see it. She stood there for a long time, reading the plaque over and over. I thought she might cry, but she didn't. Instead, she said something I didn't expect. He would have been proud of you. Not because you confronted us, but because you did it with intelligence, with evidence, with love, even though you were angry. I was angry because I loved him, I said. I know, my mother said. That's why you did it right. Here's what I want you to understand, because this is the part that matters most. The resolution isn't that everything magically became fine. My mother still has moments where she resents my success. Aunt Linda and my mother are cordial now, but they're not close. Not yet, maybe not ever. The family dynamics have shifted, but they haven't healed entirely. What healed was me. I learned that justice doesn't have to look like revenge. It can look like documentation. It can look like evidence. It can look like standing up and saying, this is what happened. This is who you are. This is what needs to change. And I learned that love and accountability aren't opposites. You can love your family and still demand the truth from them. You can honor your father's memory and still hold your mother responsible. You can build your own table, invite people to sit at it, and decide who gets to stay. That's what independence really means. Not cutting people off. Not refusing to forgive. But building something so solid, so real, so entirely your own that no one can ever make you question whether you deserve to sit there. Before I finish, I need to ask you this directly. If you've been through something like this, if you've had to choose between protecting family and protecting yourself, I want to hear from you. Not in general comments, but specifically, what would your justice look like? What would your truth sound like if you finally said it aloud? Comment below and tell me. And if you're still gathering courage, if you're still building your case, still documenting the evidence, know that you're not alone. Know that there are people sitting in their cars, in their apartments, in their bedrooms, listening to your story right now and seeing themselves in it. You belong somewhere. You deserve a table of your own. Build it. And when you do, invite people who deserve to sit there. Now, a final reflection, the kind that only comes after you've lived through something. We spend so much of our lives waiting for permission. Waiting for family to validate us. Waiting for people who hurt us to suddenly understand what they've done and apologize. Waiting to be seen as worthy, intelligent, deserving. But here's what I discovered: validation is something you give yourself. Intelligence is something you demonstrate through action. And being seen, truly seen, that only happens when you're brave enough to step into the light and let people look at you, flaws and all. My father taught me that. He didn't say it. He lived it. He was a construction worker who read philosophy. A man who struggled with money but gave anyway. A man who loved his daughter enough to leave her the tools she'd need to build her own life, and the wisdom to know she wouldn't need him to do it. I built my table. And I'm not letting anyone make me feel grateful just for being allowed to sit at it anymore. I'm building space for others now. For my students who feel invisible. For Melissa, who's learning to stop coasting. For my mother, who's slowly learning that love and truth can exist in the same space. For anyone who's ever been made to feel like their presence was a burden. You belong somewhere. You are not a guest in your own life. Build your table. And tell me your story.